If you want an all-wheel drive compact hatchback, there's only one name that matters: Subaru.
Well, not anymore, because Mazda is offering all-wheel drive in the new Mazda 3.
Yeah, but that's about where the similarities stop.
And that's a good thing, because this is prettier, it's got a nicer interior, and it's got more power.
Yeah, but this is tried and true technology, and it costs way less. Why should viewers spend all of their cash on a compact car?
There's a number of reasons why. Let me show you. One main reason you'd pick the Mazda over the Impreza is design. Just look at this car. It looks like it was designed in the past 10 years, as opposed to this Subaru Impreza, which already looks aged. To be frank, this Mazda looks like the new hotness, and this Impreza is old and busted.
On the right, you get Mazda's 2.5-liter inline-4. It makes 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque, but you only get 27 miles per gallon combined. In the Subaru, meanwhile, you get a 2-liter boxer 4 that makes 152 horsepower and 145 pound-feet of torque. But if you get the CVT, you get 31 miles per gallon combined. So basically, it's a toss-up between power and efficiency.
The difference between the Impreza and the Mazda 3 in terms of interior design is like night and day. This car looks so much more modern and luxurious. I mean, just take a look at all of the materials and this really simplified, minimalist layout. Sure, the Impreza has a massive screen, but I think that's the only thing going in its favor. This car has a head-up display and a fancy digital gauge cluster. The only significant issue to bring up with the Mazda 3 is the lack of space.
Inside, well, the Mazda has this beat. It looks way better than this, and this is getting pretty old, but it is very practical. You get this 6.5 or 8-inch screen, depending on how much you pay, and whereas the Mazda's infotainment screen is all the way up here and it kind of pinches your vision, here you get a screen up there, but it's just got the highlights, only the hits that you want to know. In the back, too, there's a bunch more space. You get an inch more headroom and an inch more legroom, which adds up to more than it sounds like. And you get lots of safety equipment, too. Even in this basic model, you get blind spot monitoring. You can have a system that lets you know if somebody's about to take off your trunk when you're backing out of spot. And you can get Subaru's EyeSight, which looks at the road ahead of you and helps with adaptive cruise and all sorts of other safety systems. So while this isn't quite as nice as the Mazdas, there's still a lot of stuff in here.
Refinement is a really important part of the new Mazda 3, and that's pretty impressive considering they've changed so much about this small car. Not only is there now all-wheel drive being offered, but there's also a completely new rear suspension setup. You see, instead of an independent rear suspension, this has a torsion beam suspension, and normally those can feel a little wobbly and out of sync with the car, but in the Mazda 3, that isn't the case. In fact, that rear suspension combined with the steering of this vehicle make it one of the most fun cars in its class. We'll see how it fares compared to the Civic, but I have a pretty good feeling about this Mazda 3. Now, Mazda enables that with its G vectoring control, which uses torque vectoring to put more weight on the front wheels and give you better steering response. Now that also works with this all-wheel drive system, which is constantly in flux. It's sending power to the front and to the rear as needed to give you an engaging drive no matter what the conditions are. And while this car is more refined than the Impreza, I find the engine can sound a little buzzy at times. Yes, this motor makes more power than the Impreza at 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque, but sometimes I feel like you can use a little bit more because you don't want to wind it up. It sounds terrible at high RPMs. Where the Mazda 3 falls flat is in terms of its practicality. Not only is it a little bit cramped, but it's kind of difficult to see out of. There's a massive C-pillar, and this rear view mirror and infotainment pinch the windshield, impacting forward visibility. One more small issue that requires some getting used to are the brakes. The Mazda 3 has a very short stroke for the brake pedal, and as a result, you end up having to press it a little bit more firmly than you would in other vehicles. It just takes some getting used to. Unlike that Impreza that we brought today, this car is fully loaded. It features adaptive cruise control, blind spot monitoring, lane keep assist, a fancy rear view camera, and all of that adds to the price. Fully loaded, this car with all-wheel drive will set you back nearly $30,000, but you can get in an all-wheel drive hatchback for much less than that, about $26,000. Still, that's much more expensive than a Subaru Impreza, which comes standard with all-wheel drive. Overall, I'm really impressed with the Mazda 3, especially now that it offers all-wheel drive. That's an extra something to help sell it. But if you've wanted all-wheel drive in a compact car, the option was always the Impreza. So let's see how Sebastian is doing in that car now.
I gotta say, driving a manual in a boring hatchback is a breath of fresh air. Not just because I'm one of those desperately sad, save the manual types, I am, but that's beside the point. I do genuinely think that the manual in a car like this, and I've said this about the Jetta as well, makes it feel a little bit faster. I don't know what it is about the CVT. I don't hate CVTs, but they do feel a little steady, a little slower. And automatics too. It might just be because they're shifting too low. And it's not really a Mazda 3 if we're honest. It's got about 30 fewer horsepower and about 40 fewer foot-pounds of torque and half a liter less displacement. So it's still, let's say, got more chassis than it does engine if we're being polite. But a good chassis it does have. It's a stiff body with soft springs, so even on a bumpy road like this, I'm not having my teeth chattered out. It's comfortable. And honestly, I think that smaller engine does sound a little better than the Mazda's buzzy little thing. Mind you, you do hear it a lot. NVH in this thing is much worse than in the Mazda. But we knew that this was less refined, and that's par for the course. And the chassis comes standard with full-time Symmetrical all-wheel drive, which Subaru owners love to brag about because it's actually really good. It's really grippy and it's confidence-inspiring. And even on these crappy all seasons, it really feels good. The only problem with it is that you get somewhat questionable fuel economy. This gets 26 mpg combined, which is one worse than the Mazda, even though that has a bigger engine. But this interior isn't about refinement. We knew that the Mazda was going to be better, if we're honest. This is about value, and you get a lot of value in this thing. You get a lot of really great technology for not that much. You get this huge screen, you get the stuff that I was talking about earlier, and you get eyesight, but you don't get it with the manual, which is kind of annoying. Ultimately, this is a good car, but it's outgunned. I like a good underdog, but this very much is an underdog in this fight. Well, I can see your point. For years, this was your only option if you wanted an all-wheel drive compact car, but now Mazda's come in with something that feels pretty darn special.
Not only is it special, it has a fantastic interior that's impossible to beat. It's also got a powerful engine and it's a blast to drive. I can clearly see why people would spend the extra money on something like this.